Good morning, good evening, whenever you are watching this video. This is Bernhard Lassahn from Berlin. I'll talk to you as a father and as a writer, mostly known for books for children. Please be patient with my German pronunciation and my clumsy and strange wording. I know this is not without mistakes. Anyway, I will do my second best and hope to at least meet the standards of Greta Thunberg, and hope you will be with me when I talk to you about the tragedy of fatherlessness, especially in Germany. I'm thankful to Mike Buchanan and his works. Having been an organizer myself, I know what I'm talking about and know that most of this kind of work passes by unrewarded. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak up. It is my pleasure, and I regard it as an honor to be part of this initiative. So here we go. Chapter 1. The Family of the Little Bird. I'll start with an early image of fatherhood in utopian vision and a realistic portrait drawn from real life as well. A model of harmony and peace. Bartolomé Esteban Murillo from Sevilla, Spain, finished this painting in 1650. It is called Sagrada Familia del Parajito. This means the Holy Family of the Little Bird. The artist Esteban Murillo is, next to Diego Velázquez, a representative of the so-called golden age of Spanish painting. There is an atmosphere of calmness and a sense of peace, and even some traces of happiness. Joseph seems to be almost in the center and in the background at the same time. His work, his profession, is almost hidden in the dark, but we can imagine what he is doing. He is a carpenter. Saint Joseph is a patron saint of all workers. So Joseph in the painting is a worker, and he is a father and a family man at the same time. He opens his arms, and they serve as some kind of guardrails to the boy Jesus, who is standing already on his own feet. These arms will open up more and provide more and more freedom for the boy as he will grow older and step away from his parents. Mary is not in the center, but in the light. She is where we find most of the light colors. We see her profile. We do not see her face to face as we usually do. We see her without the baby child in her arms as we know her. This time we also see her in the company of Joseph. We are used to images of Mary that show her without her husband. She apparently does do some kind of home office work, so to speak. She goes to the market, buying or selling something. She looks content. She seems to be pleased to look at this scenery, to see how the little child is doing, playing around with the little bird and the dog under the protection and guidance of Joseph. The big surprise is Jesus in kindergarten age, in the center, in the light, already on his own feet, no longer in the arms of Mary, not yet hanging at a cross. He enjoys this period of time in between his most prominent positions, and he uses it properly to play and fool around and explore the world of animals. The most important creature in this painting is the smallest creature, the little bird that gave the name to the painting. The little bird is representing something coming from above, the Holy Spirit in the hands of Jesus, actually in only one hand, that is bringing some respect for the miracle of creation and godliness into the everyday world of an earthly life, of a normal family in a small doses. Anyway, this is how I look at this painting as someone who left the Protestant church and not yet joined another one. We see a happy assembly of a man, a woman, and a child, joined by a playful, somewhat humorous spirit with a glimpse of something transcendent. The bird in his hand, in the hand of the child. This family is not dominated by the mother, not dominated by the father. It is not dominated by the child either. The little bird is providing some kind of invisible umbrella of blessing from some higher entity that all humans are subordinated to. The question, who is superior, is completely out of place in this situation. It is the wrong question. Nobody is superior. But this question, who is superior, is the number one question of feminists. It's their standard question. It is a wrong question, but a very old one as well. And so now I will leave Spain and go to Italy, to Venezia. I will introduce you to an early appearance of feminism and their utopian vision of the world. So please join me for the next chapter. Chapter 2, The Shady Garden of Venice. I will introduce you now to an early appearance of feminism, maybe the first one at all. Here we find the wrong answer to the wrong question. The wrong question was who should be superior, and here is the answer. It is presented to you by Moderata Fonte. Her real name was Modesto di Pozzo. She called herself Moderata, meaning the humble, the undemanding. Her parents died of the Black Plague. They probably had corona as well. She was some kind of a child genius, brought up as an orphan, well-educated, musically talented. In the year 1600, she published a book with the title, The Worth of Women, wherein is clearly revealed their nobility and their superiority to men, by Moderata Fonte. She claims that women have a natural priority. Men should do the hard labor because they are stronger by nature, so they can endure all the hardships it takes to serve the noble women who do not even like them. As they clearly state in the book, they rather buy a pig every carnival season than live with a man. Yeah, that sounds familiar to us. This is the sound of feminism as we know it. A pure statement of disgust. That's all. No argument, no critique, no reasoning. Of course, we do not find any of the new topics of today in an old book. There are no complaints about wage gap, rape, or male privilege, no call for quotas, no complaining that men are being overrepresented in the field of arts, and of course no initiative for a women-only gondola. We do not find the classics of feminism either. There's no talk about abortion. Actually, Moderata had 4 children. And no talk about divorce. Surprisingly enough, Moderata praised her husband as being very generous. So why do I still consider this to be the 0 hour of feminism? Because it is a pure statement of discontentment and disgust, that's all. Feminism is not a set of arguments, not a coherent system of thoughts or a list of topics that should be dealt with. Men are easily tempted to respond and make the mistake to formulate a counter-argument based on facts and things they won the discussion and the argument. They might even go through the list of complaints and problems and look for solutions, but that's all in vain. A feminist complaint is not an invitation to an argument. Instead, it's a complete communication breakdown. Moderata Fonte must have known the Roman law and must have been familiar with the principle of audiatur et altra pars, that is, always listen to the other side. She did not. She did not listen. She was not interested. She did not even recognize the other side properly. Not to recognize each other, in biblical terms, is not to be able to love one another. Feminism is a set of emotions and predispositions that arise under circumstances. So let's look at these conditions and circumstances that made feminism flourish and grow. It sounds like I would be talking about a garden, and in fact I do. I'm talking about a garden, the germ of feminism, the shady garden in Venice. This garden gave birth to the book. The young and wealthy widow Leonora invited some noble ladies in her beautiful garden to gossip about men. The garden is described as very delightful because there were no men allowed. It was one of the first safe spaces for women, maybe the first one at all. The garden functioned as a greenhouse and produced the famous greenhouse effect. It enforced and multiplied the collected feelings and disgust. It was this very situation that brought about the idea that women could get rid of all men altogether once and for all. This idea could only come into being in a place and a situation like this. Only these special conditions bring up certain traits in female nature and turn otherwise probably nice ladies into feminist radicals. They are like this. Women sometimes break up communication. They do this. Everybody knows a mother that would not talk to her child for a while in order to punish the child. The withdrawal of attention is used quite frequently. It belongs to the repertoire of passive aggression. It occurs every once in a while in personal surrounding, but should not be transferred into the public sphere. Women are also famous for being extremely picky and choosy sometimes. The data taken from dating platforms show that women consider 80% of all men as below average. They return things they bought at Amazon by a large margin. They are not content. They always look for something better. This is how they are. This is how they are, and it has a function in the evolutionary program. It's a small annoyance for a man and a giant step for mankind, because it turns out to be one of the driving forces that bring about civilization and inventions of all kind. You have to live these spoiled sports in your private life every once in a while, and their utterances might even have some truth in a given context. But if you generalize these impulses, they become a statement that is definitely untrue. This is what the garden does. It functions as a greenhouse and produces a heated team spirit. And that produced the book. The Shady Garden of Venice is not a kindergarten. It is not inclusive, just the opposite. It is an no man, no dogs, no children allowed garden. It is not a public park, not a stone garden for meditation like the famous garden in Kyoto. It's not a Garden of Eden, but rather a cheesy parody of paradise. It's something like an all-inclusive vacation in Club Méditerranée somebody else paid for. It's a sad party for parasites. It's the First Wives Club, a gated and well-protected community somewhere in a dark, dead-end street in Venice. It's an utopian vision without a future. Chapter 3. Where have all the young men gone? Fatherlessness after the war. I make a big jump now in time and space and go to Germany in the year 1945. What was the situation like? Where had all the young men gone? Gone to graveyard everyone. When will they ever learn? There were many men missing, millions of them dead. After World War II, it is estimated that about a quarter of the children grew up fatherless. We had two famous books, On the Way to Fatherlessness and The Fatherless Society, that had the word fatherlessness already in their title, and the slogan, The Fatherless Society, turned into something like a running gag. Everybody knew we had a fatherless society after the war, even though feminists tend to look at the time as a dark age of patriarchy before the rise of the second wave of feminism. It was, in reality, a female-dominated period of time already. If all the young men have gone, the fathers have gone too, and the male voters have gone as well. It was not until 1956 that the last prisoners returned from Siberia, more than 10 years after the war. Female voters outnumbered male voters by 7 million. That led to the first and only one-party government in post-war Germany history, which had been easy to foresee. A female majority would vote for a conservative party, and that's what they did. It also led to important changes in the legal system. In the Weimar Republic, it was stated, women and men do have the same rights and obligations. The new post-war constitution granted women the same rights without obligations. The new divorce laws of 1977 entitled a woman to deliberately ruin her marriage, betray her husband, and still receive alimony. Another new law makes it illegal for a man to have a paternity test without the approval of the mother. All these changes were possible because women held the majority of votes in the beginning, and later on they dominated the public opinion. So, if the fathers have all gone, the male voters have all gone, the male teachers have all gone as well. After the war, there had been a call for teachers, teachers, teachers. It was well understood that teachers hold the key position. They decide who would go to university to become a doctor, a lawyer, a scientist. Their position was seen at the eye of the needle. The disaster of war was just over. Now Germany was heading for a new, additional, an educational disaster. To prevent this coming up catastrophe, as it was called, everything was done to recruit new teachers, especially women. There was a strong request. The universities did not have enough room for crash courses to teach young women to become teachers, so they had to be held in cinemas in the morning. The Fräulein successfully invaded and soon dominated the school system. The famous long march into the institution did not start in 1968. By the time it was over, it had been a rather short march anyway, and a march on high heels. Of course, not all female teachers are feminists. They do not buy all the new slogans that are offered in the feminist boutique, but they do not object to them either. They eagerly open their arms to everything coming from advocates of women's interest and faithfully obey to the state and any order that is coming top down. Wilhelm von Humboldt, father of universities and pioneer of the educational science in Prussia, feared that teachers depending on the state would turn out to be the worst kind of teachers he could imagine. His ideal was instead an independent science and an independent educational system. He died in 1835. If the male voters have all gone, the male teachers have all gone, the male role models have gone as well. After the war, there were no German male idols anymore. We had a Fräulein Wunder, a miracle of recovery of Germany made possible by women, but we had no German male role models, no male German idols. They were discredited. Everything coming from abroad seemed to be much better, innocent, and of somehow higher value. One of the first pop stars after the war was Elvis Presley, who served his time as a soldier in Germany and recorded a song in German. The American government started the so-called re-education program and introduced writers like Walt Whitman to a German public. Yes, but it was not as successful as the invasion of British pop music. The Beatles recorded 2 songs in German. Nice try, but not a real success. The young Germans preferred English versions and renounced the German language and culture in general. Some kind of elaborated pidgin is now on the way to become the first language in Germany, as though we would not need the German language anymore. For example, the German title of the Jordan Peterson book, 12 Rules for Life, is 12 Rules for Life. I will finish this chapter with an episode that seems to me more than just an anecdotal episode. It is the story of a German mother and her 3 daughters. She lost her husband in the war, but managed to raise her children anyway. They grew up and got married. Now the mother cannot believe that all of her 3 girls are heading for divorce. What are they doing? They continue the fatherlessness they experience themselves. Women who are angry with men in general are not angry and disappointed because they had experienced a bad father, but a missing father. It looks like this is the case for many of the leading female voices, including Moderata Fonte. She did not have a bad father. She had no father at all. Anyway, her book and her ideal of the garden that keeps out any man had a comeback. And this is what the next chapter will be all about. Chapter 4. The garden turning into a camp. In the 70s, we observed the uprising of the so-called second wave of feminism. To tell the story in their own words, it goes like this. The movement, in their own estimation one of the most important ones in history ever, started with throwing tomatoes at a male speaker. These are their own words. It's not a version an anti-feminist is making up to discredit the movement. The tomatoes are still at hand, still around. Now they are called shitstorm. Any discussion with feminists can lead to a communication breakdown any time. Remember Moderata Fonte? A long-forgotten book about the superiority of women was republished in the 70s as an example of early female scholarship. There was a market for this kind of flat earth-like oversimplification that would split the world in half. Men bad, women good. In the words of Moderata Fonte, the women as the noble creatures free from evil, unlike the man, and they devote themselves to good. What happened in the 70s looked a lot like an attempt to re-establish the shady garden of Venice. We had now women-only shelter, women-only taxis, women-only parking spaces, women-only cafes, women-only bookshops, women-only libraries. And that raised a question. I regard this to be a minor breach in civilization. Books are for everyone who is interested on his own request. To claim that a library in the 70s in the Western Hemisphere would not be a safe enough space for a woman shows how far they tried to push the agenda. How far? Too far. Beyond the reasonable. But if you go beyond the reasonable, you turn any initiative into a power game, into a funny limbo party raising the questions, how low can you go? But it was not funny anymore. It could not really be taken seriously, but then again, nobody would laugh about it either. It was beyond seriousness and ridiculousness. And we also witnessed the return of the greenhouse effect. I'll give you just one example. Lesbians in the Protestant church met secretly in a monastery, in a kind of secret garden, to confirm their views and heat up their emotions until they felt strong enough to join the community again and import their special worldview. Now they are not only well integrated as lesbians, they are somewhat dominant. Nobody would dare to criticize or contradict them. Lesbians do have the permission to rewrite songs, and now we have a new version of the Bible in which you are told that Jesus had female disciples, in case you didn't know. It is written in the book. Feminism is no longer a democratic movement, let alone a grassroots initiative. They soon became the establishment and now have the opportunity to misuse their power, which they frequently do. All political parties in power use the feminist vocabulary and the feminist grammar and subordinate themselves to the primitive worldview of women good, man bad. There is no feminism without sponsering. The garden in Venice, remember, flourished only because of a high standard of living and the position of the noble ladies to be able to tell their servants what they should do next to fulfill their wishes. We now have a female biotope. Women are dominating the landscape. They are here, there, and everywhere, which is quite a delight for people like me who enjoy to have them around and who want the best for them. Why not? I had a mother, I have a daughter, and among whatever I like most, women are number one on my list. Yes, I do love women, not all of them, of course, and only very, very few of them very, very much. Not all of them call themselves feminists. Actually, only a small minority of them identify as feminists anymore, but only a small minority of them ever speak up against feminism, and it looks like the silent majority is going along with every feminist dogma. That makes it easy for the activists to believe that they are speaking on behalf of all women and regard the silent masses as sleeping reserve, as actually sleeping and not awakened yet, not woke yet. Feminist activists have in relation to the artificially constructed mega group of all women like hooligans have to a football team. Everybody likes the sport and wants the team to have a successful performance. The hooligans who claim to act on behalf of the team feel free to break the written laws and the unwritten laws of social conduct as well. You might have the impression that the garden is growing and the activists want to turn the whole world into a safe space, into a garden without any wrong opinion, without a snake, without a virus, without any word about a woman that is not a compliment, without any male creature at all. But there will be no peace in this kind of garden. You always have to be alert, always ready to fight any hypothetical intruders and evildoers. You have to keep the high standards and even raise them continually. There will be a permanent fight against sexism and anything that is considered to be right-wing, in other words, to be Nazi. And that is what we are having right now and what I will be discussing in the next chapter. Chapter 5. Nazis and sexists are forever. Okay, let's go back in time again to Germany in the year 1965, a very important year. It is now 20 years after 1945, the end of the war. 20 years is a realistic time for a death penalty today. After 20 years in prison, or sometimes even earlier, you will be released. You are free to start over again. Even if you had not been in prison, after 20 years the book will be closed on the case, and whatever the sins might have been, they will be not forgotten but somehow forgiven, and you will be no longer sued, and you have a second chance. So in 1965 the question came up, should we have a general amnesty and say, war is over, 20 years have gone by, we start all over again with a new generation that had nothing to do with the sins of their ancestors and now is of legal age. The general feeling in the time was no, we should not do that. So they extended the deadline and added 4 more years, arguing that we should not look at the year 1945, but instead at the year 1949, the year of the new republic. So there would be no general amnesty before 1969. But before 1969 we had the famous year 1968 with a lot of social uprising and political unrest. In a situation like that, it was assumed that there should be no general amnesty, so they added 10 more years and announced an amnesty not before 1979. In 1978, the television show Holocaust had a record-breaking number of people watching it, leading to a heated discussion. The term Holocaust, a word hardly ever been heard before in Germany, entered now the common parlance. The German Bundestag decided that there would be no general amnesty at all. Nazis never die. The Nazi charge is still viral. You can be called a Nazi even though the real Nazis are long dead by now. But the Nazi virus still seems to be around. It looks like a German specialty. But there are more possible ways for a man to be guilty in a matter that will be never forgiven and forgotten. And this is the sexist charge. You can be accused of sexism even though you didn't know what it was when it happened. In Germany, we had a provincial version of the Me Too hysteria. We had sexism too. Sexists are forever, like Nazis. There is no time limit. The oldest case takes you back 71 years. The victim was Gina Lollobrigida. She does not really remember. She must have been 19 years old when she had sex and didn't like it. The oldest evildoer is George Bush Sr. He's dead now. He molested a young actress by telling her a joke she did not like. Bush apologized and claimed that he was always telling the same joke to everyone, which sounds believable to me. But this is not funny anymore. You have to be careful if you find yourself in a society that has lost the sense of humor and does not understand jokes anymore. You also have to be careful if you find yourself in a society that is unable to forgive. If there is no second chance, any mistake could be fatal. Even a minor error could be the end of your social life and your career. You will always be outside of the garden. Stable and peaceful societies, on the other hand, give space to opposition and have a system of reconciliation. Take, for example, the famous broken dish verdicts of the Greek. A politician who was voted out that way would have to spend some time in a penalty box and could return and try again. Another important element of a peaceful and free society is the presumption of innocence. It might have the disadvantage that a criminal might get away from a punishment he really deserves, but this is not the point. The point is that the large majority of the innocent feel safe. If the innocents are no longer protected, we have a totalitarian system that Hannah Arendt describes like this. In such a system, the criminals are free, the innocents are in prison. Feminists have deliberately attacked this golden rule for a civil society with a human face. In Germany, the word presumption of innocence was nominated to be a no-no word that's so bad you should not use it and not even think about it. Famous is a communist and female activist, Dolores Ibarruri, who coined the slogan, "No pasaran," and she said, "It is better for 100 innocent people to die than for an enemy of our party to escape." Germany has a history of 2 totalitarian societies, and it looks like Germans strive for perfection. They had done a good job in establishing a system of complete control and denunciation, a system so well structured that you could not trust anyone. You couldn't trust your family members or even your loved ones. Everyone could be a perpetrator, someone who denounce and damage you for life. And these are the rules for denunciation. You are guilty by association, guilty by accusation, and guilty by name-calling. You are a Nazi not because you are a self-declared Nazi or really are a Nazi, but because you are called being a Nazi. The accusation already serves as the verdict of guilt. So this is where we are in the moment. The problem is, how do you handle mistakes? I paraphrase a word of Karl Jaspers, who says, "There will be no peace without freedom and no freedom without truth." You will have, of course, no peace within a society if you do not provide room for opposition and for freedom of speech. But what do you want to say? You cannot speak the truth because you do not know the truth. You have to look for it. The road to truth is full of stumbling blocks, in other words, full of mistakes you are making. But you have to make the mistakes in order to proceed. So you do have to handle mistakes with generosity and humor. Chapter 6. The language makes you lie. The German language is distorted and cannot be used for a discussion about the situation of men and women probably anymore. Okay, these are big words that need to be explained. In English, you have an actor and an actress. You have a steward and a stewardess. In Germany, we have invented new words using such S ending. In Germany, it's an in ending. So we now have something like a voteress and a listeneress and a taxpayeress. Even though these words have never been used before and sound awkward, they are now the standard. Well, you might think it seems to be fair to use such new creations in a singular form, even though it is unnecessary to indicate the biological sex all the time. But if that is what German females want, why not? If they want to run around with a sign that says in capital letters, "Mind my biological sex as a woman anytime," why not? It is ridiculous, but if women want it, let them have their way. But when it comes to using the plural form and referring to a group, you are referring to a group and no longer to an individual, this feminist speech code goes completely off the rails. In English, you have friends and writers when talking about a group. In Germany, we now have friendesses and friends and writeresses and writers, as though we would be talking about two different groups. The German language used to be famous for being precise. That's gone. The feminist speech code forces us to forget about the distinction between one group and two groups. This is the price we have to pay if we want to submit to their language regime. And we have to, otherwise we will be kept out of the garden. Feminists have insisted on the destruction of the structures of the language since the 70s, and they have been very successful. The female-dominated school system, the female-dominated journalism made it possible. If you listen to the news now, you hear them talk about the scienticists and scientists, the doctoresses and doctors fighting the superspreaderists and superspreaders of the coronavirus. This is German language today. The message is there is no word to refer to men and women as a unit. They always have to be seen as two different groups that have to be looked at as groups that will never ever unite and would never ever have that much in common that they could overcome the sexual apartheid. If you start a conversation talking about teachers and teachers, you might as well stop it right now, because the result will be that you are dealing with two different groups without any common interest. There's not even a word that would unite them on the level of grammar. Separation forever, apartheid forever. This is the conditio sine qua non of feminism, perfectly coined in their speech code, and it is being repeated over and over and over again. The old slogan, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle," is back. Esther Villar's version of this slogan, by the way, did go like this: "A woman needs a man like a car needs a gasoline." This speech code creates a setup of a crooked game. Men compete against women. Men fight against women. There's a war between the man and the woman. This is the worldview of Moderata Fonte and of the average woman leaning slightly towards feminism today. It is the program of the politics of today. They produce a bunch of statistic material that show the necessity of affirmative action and quotas and present the sexes as two teams at each other's throat. Is this really the case? Okay, I will tell you now about a video artist that I like very much. Her name is Pippi Lotti Rist. Her real name is Charlotte Rist. And I've seen a video installation that really impressed me and made me laugh. And it's one of the few examples of contemporary art I really like. And it goes like this. It is an installation of an indoor football game. You see the crowd going mad, and you see one team is playing from left to right, the other from right to left, and you see a ball going back and forth, and it's all fine. If you take a closer look, you see one team is playing football, and the other team is playing basketball. So if one team has the ball, they kick it, and if the other team gets the ball, they use their hands. So in other words, they are playing according to two different standards of rules. This is what a competition between men and women really look like. They are not playing the same games. They have different priorities and different set of rules. The ball is representing the workplace. If the men are dealing with the workplace, they have different standards. They want to raise money, and they want to make more money, and they want to be good. If women do have the ball and do deal with the workplace, they have a different idea. They want to have work-life balance. Take the child as an example. If men are dealing with the child, I'm not telling that they are kicking the child if they are the football players, but they have a different set of values, a different set of standards. They tend to encourage the child. If women deal with the child, they tend to protect the child. So they have two different set of values, and they follow two different set of rules. And it's quite good. It's okay. So it's okay. The only wrong question about this set of game is, who is winning? Nobody is winning. Who is superior? This is out of the place. Nobody is superior. The end result of the game is not interesting for everyone, because we want to be every side to do a good job. Women should do a good job, and men do a good job according to their own set of rules. But the evil of competition, as Rousseau has called it, spoils the game. Last chapter. Fatherlessness after feminism. Women strive for the good, as Moderator Fonte said. They deserve to be the winners. In Germany, we would probably say they deserve to be the winneresses. They not only want to win, they want to overcome the enemy. They want to overcome the man. And they probably misunderstood the words of the song, "We shall overcome, we shall overcome." Well, they don't want to overcome a fear or a separation. They want to overcome the people. And this is what they have stated in the program of the Social Democratic Party. They really say that. They say, whoever wants a human society must overcome the male society. But there is no such a thing as a male society, apart from Robinson Crusoe and Friday. A male society will not live anyway. It will not have a second generation. It will die anyway. Why overcome a male society? A male society cannot live at all. Women have done everything to exclude men from the garden and from the family. And they now have the situation that a paternity test is illegal without the permission of the mother. In the 70s, we had the song, "This Country Needs New Men." And now we do have the new men. They were coming in since 2015. And we have about 3 million people coming in that are called refugees, sometimes migrants. Most of them are young men. And these young men now substitute the old man. We have in 2018 about 50,000 babies without information about the father. 50,000, that is like a small village. And it's not that the mothers do not know the father, but they are allowed to keep it secret and not to talk about the father. We can imagine he might be one that would not be able to give any money and support to the child anyway, and so they ask for the support of the society. This is the situation we have right now. Men are expelled from the garden and from the family. And I will close with an image of a more modern fatherhood. And it's a video clip. It was displayed to promote the climate conference in Copenhagen in 2009, considered to be the least successful one and the biggest at the same time. I have to give you a brief description of the video. I do not know if there would have been any copyright claims involved, so I do not present the original video. You have to put up with my improvised description. Okay. You see railroad tracks reaching from the background towards the viewer. There's a man dressed in a long black overcoat standing with legs apart on the track. From a distance, a train is slowly approaching. looking like some old Western Union train in the times of the Wild West. The man is not moving at all, as if he does not notice the danger. In the last possible second, he jumps off the track. In this very moment, you see a little girl that had been hidden behind him, so you could not see the girl before. She now will be rolled over by the train. That is not shown in the video. You do not see it on the screen, but you see it in your dreams. The message is clear. Men are the enemies of women. They sacrifice the next generation, the girls, in order to stick to their patriarchal tyranny and to the dangerous technical standard they have created, and they will get away with it unless we stop them and reduce the CO2 emissions. It is false to an extreme. The extreme opposite is the truth. Fathers sacrifice their lives to save the one of the child. We had terrorist attacks in Barcelona and Stockholm. The same scenery, a big car rushed into a crowd of pedestrians, killing several innocent people. In both cases, a father literally threw himself under the bus and by sacrificing his life saved the one of this child. We will surely not see a video clip of this kind of heroism, and we do not have to. Because it comes up in the dreams. It comes up in the dreams of all the fathers. I was dreaming of jumping out of a burning house from a balcony with the child in my arms, breaking my legs, saving the child. Where do these dreams come from? I think they are quite common, and they tell the truth about the relationship of a father to a child. I will close this chapter by a quote of the Nobel Prize-winning German writer Peter Handke, who speaks about the time he spent with his daughter as a single stay-at-home dad. He was criticized a lot in these days by people who did not have children. But he says, children are the soul of all people. Those who did not experience this may suffer less, but their well-being is misguided happiness. Thank you very much.